I'd like to talk to you about self-confidence. It's a topic and a subject that I think is very important. I believe it's very vital for everyone to understand. But more than anything, it's a topic that I've had to learn. As I grow, I still have to keep relearning, and I believe it's a never-ending part of life. No one is born with self-confidence. I think that's probably the most important place that we should start. No one is born with self-confidence. It's a learned habit, it's a learned lifestyle, it's a learned behavior. And more than anything, it's a choice. It's something you choose. There are people, however, who are perhaps nurtured into an environment where a positive self-esteem, a positive self-image is encouraged, and therefore they develop confidence in themselves. And so what I'd like to do in the time that we have is share some of my thoughts and some of my perhaps experiences and struggles and perhaps some of my beliefs about how to develop and how to continue to build your self-confidence. I'm going to talk about a few things. I hope perhaps I'm able to express in words how I really feel about the subject. And it's a very, in my opinion, an emotional subject for me because I have seen and I've experienced what it feels like to have a low self-confidence, for your self-esteem to be low, for your self-image to be somewhat distorted. And it took me a long time to really understand the concepts and how to continually improve and grow, because that's the most important thing, that you're growing every day. And so I hope that perhaps in the next few minutes you find something that is valuable, something that you can use, and something that you can try. I'm going to combine philosophy with a little bit of, you might say, principles, and I'm going to combine it with what I call a strategy. And finally, I'm going to combine that with tactics. Now, let me explain why I'm using those four key indicators. A philosophy simply is a way of thinking, and the quality of your life comes from how you think. And so it's not just about knowing what to do, you've got to know how to think, because if things change, you've got to be able to change with times and think differently. Principles are what I call laws of life, the way things work. And if you can understand how things are meant to work and how things are meant to operate, if you understand the principles of life, then life becomes very easy. So in addition to talking about philosophy based on how to think, I'm going to combine it with how things work and how the universe is meant to operate and how you should perceive and how you should change and adapt and how you should use universal principles and laws to your advantage. Then I'm going to talk about a strategy. And a strategy is simply a plan on how you can then improve your self-confidence, how you can develop better self-esteem, and then tactics. Tactics would be what to do. Your strategy is the plan. Your tactics is exactly the action steps you're going to take. And I believe that these action steps is what's really going to change your life. And these action steps will be daily habits that you must apply and practice in order to develop and continue to build on your self-confidence. Now, let me begin by saying this. I started initially by saying that no one is born with self-confidence. Some of us are born into an environment where we are made to understand our value. And as a result of knowing our value, we have confidence in ourselves. Now, let me start by defining 3 or 4 different concepts. The first is self-image. Your self-image is simply the picture you have about yourself. Self-esteem is the estimation you have about who you are in terms of your worth. Self-confidence is belief you have in yourself. And the 3 of them are interlinked But at the foundation is your self-image. The most important part of developing your self-confidence is understanding yourself, is understanding and having a clear picture of who you really are. Now, anyone who lacks self-confidence, anyone who has low self-esteem, anyone who has a poor self-image, in my opinion, should not be disheartened. The person, or whoever that might be, should not feel ashamed. And I will say this, that we have 7 billion people in the world today. And I can promise you, none of the 7 billion people that are alive today is more intelligent than you are, is more skillful than you are, is more knowledgeable than you are. No one was born with more talents or skills or gifts. That's the point I'm trying to make. But some of us have developed certain knowledge, certain skills, and that development has led us to be a little bit more confident because we know what we have. Every one of us has the same unlimited potential. So the most important thing you must start with if you want to build self-confidence is go back to the basics. And the basics lies in understanding your self-image. Most people have a self-confidence issue or self-esteem issue or self-image issue as a result of what I call ignorance. Now let me qualify that so you don't take it the wrong way, because by using the word ignorance, I'm not saying that's something to be ashamed of. Absolutely not. I am ignorant in a lot of areas in life. I'm not ashamed to say it. By admitting that I do not know, it means I position myself in what I call a learner's mindset, meaning I'm willing now to go and look and search for answers. I don't understand anything about medical sciences. I'm not a doctor. I don't understand anything about aeronautical engineering. I didn't study engineering and aeronautical engineering. Now, if you bring me into areas that I understand, you might recognize that there are some areas in life that I have an understanding and I have some skills and talents. Every one of us has the same. Now, some people started at a very young age, and some people started at a much older age, developing their core competence. And whenever you develop a core competence, you develop knowledge, you develop skills. And as you develop knowledge and skills, what you find is that you grow. And as you grow, something happens. Your self-confidence increases. Reason being that now you're starting to increase the level of belief you have in yourself, because you have perhaps a history of results that can confirm or validate how good you are. So the first step to improving your self-confidence is recognizing that at the foundation is your self-image. And each and every one of us has a self-image. We have a picture of who we think we are. If we stand in front of the mirror, we have a reflection that we see. That reflection is your outer image. But we also have what we call an inner image. And your inner image is simply a portrait that you have about yourself. It's a combination of perhaps the opinions that others have about you, the opinions you have about yourself. Those opinions generally have come from your past. They've come from the results you've created in the past. They've come from the environment you grew up in or you currently live in right now. They come from your associations, the relationships you have. They also come from the dreams and the goals that you have of yourself. They come from the mistakes you've made and the successes you've had. Now, if you combine all of that, with that you have what we call an image, a picture. So in many cases, you see some people who are exceptionally beautiful externally, but they have a very low self-image of themselves. And sometimes it's difficult to understand why. Well, the reason is very simple. The reason is because although they can see the external image, they have an internal self-image that governs their level of performance in life. The self-image internal overrides the external self-image. And this is what I find very profound, but also very interesting. Your self-image is like an automatic guidance system. It controls the direction of your life. It limits you. It promotes you. So if you have a rich self-image, you find that you have a great life because you always see yourself in the best light. If you have a poor self-image, then it doesn't matter what happens externally. You will always feel as though you're not good enough. And this is the reason why most people who are very beautiful, sometimes you find them maybe going into drugs, perhaps sometimes going into other things that you would, in many ways, you would question why they would do that. And part of that is simply because they have I would like to use the word, a distorted self-image, which is a wrong self-image. And the reason for that is because at some points in their life, now I'm not being a judge here, but at some point in their life, at a young age, usually, or based on a combination of events that have happened over time, someone looked at them and said, you're not good enough. Someone looked at them and said, you're not going to amount to anything in life. Perhaps someone abused them, maybe even, physically. Perhaps someone abused them emotionally. Someone abused them spiritually. Or maybe someone abused them mentally. And so they've held on to this perception, though false, that other people have. And because they believe that opinion, that paints a picture. And that picture is larger than what we call the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind controls your life. I'm not going to go deep into this because this is a whole different topic and I can talk about it for hours. So the most important thing is the foundation, which is your self-image. What you must do if you're lacking self-confidence is to change or alter the self-image. And the reason is because there are two types of self-confidence. There's what we call real self-confidence, and there's what we call situational self-confidence. I could also use the word internal self-confidence and external self-confidence. So for example, you see some people and they seem motivated, they're happy. They say things like, when the going gets tough, tough gets going, no pain, no gain, let's go. When people are around, they're activated, they're motivated. That is external self-confidence. It means that you need a catalyst. And when that catalyst is not around or available, you find that the confidence disappears. Some people get their confidence perhaps when they take drugs. Some people get their confidence when they drink alcohol. Some people have confidence even when they perhaps spend time with people, have people around you who boost your self-esteem. That is situational self-confidence. It's interesting. It's not a bad idea to have it around you, but it's not what you want, because it means if you're relying on something external to remind you or to boost your confidence, then you put yourself in a position whereby if that thing is not available, then you're stuck. Some people have self-confidence based on an external part of them. I think this is important. And I'm going to say something that I want you to listen to very, very carefully and perhaps write this down if you're not writing. Whenever you connect your sense of self-worth or self-esteem or self-image to something external to yourself, you will find that because the one constant in life is change, whenever there's change, you will find that your self-esteem or self-confidence fails or drops, because effectively what you're doing is you're relying on something outside to validate you. Let me make this more simple. If your self-confidence comes from the fact that you're beautiful or you're pretty or you're handsome, or you have long hair, beautiful long hair, what happens if your hair has to be cut off? What happens if perhaps you develop some illness and they have to shave your hair? Your confidence disappears. If your confidence is based on your net worth and what you have in the bank, what happens if you lose all your money? You go bankrupt. Some people go into depression because they relied on something external to themselves to validate who they are on the inside. Now, it doesn't work that way. It's not from without to within. It's as within, so without. If your self-confidence is based on perhaps anything external to you, maybe your physique, your looks, your intelligence. What happens if it's taken from you? So the key thing to remember is that your self-confidence can be situational. It can come from external factors or external circumstances. That is the weaker part of self-confidence. The most important form of your self-confidence is the internal self-confidence, because that's the one connected to your self-image. Now, let's move up a little bit further. How do you develop self-confidence? Well, it can come only by improving and increasing your understanding about who you are, improving your understanding about your true nature, and having the courage to change that image you have about yourself. Now, this will come across as quite strange. It's possible to find someone who is a medical doctor, who is exceptional as a doctor and is very confident as a doctor. But if you take the same medical doctor and you put them in perhaps in a different environment, let's say you get them to be amongst people where they have to be in a social setting and you want them to interact and talk socially, you find that they don't have any self-confidence. You take the same doctor, you put him back in the surgery room, you put him in the hospital, and he can talk to 1,000 people and everyone will be in awe because he's talking about something that he understands or she understands. You put them in a different environment, perhaps you want them to learn how to roller skate, and they're terrified. They have no confidence. Why? Because it's outside the area of competence. It's out of their comfort zone. So one of the things you have to be comfortable with is the knowledge and the understanding that although you have a self-image, you have a sub-self-image in every area or category that interests you in life. For example, each and every one of us has a self-image when it comes to our health. We have a self-image when it comes to financial provision and wealth. We have a self-image when it comes to who we are as individuals in terms of our contribution, our worth. We have a self-image perhaps when it comes to work, what we do, maybe education if we're not working. And you have to develop a self-image in each area that you want to become more confident in. So, for example, if you want to become more confident as a speaker, as a public speaker, you have to develop a new image of yourself as a speaker. If you want to become perhaps someone who is a little bit more knowledgeable about finances and wealth, you have to develop a new self-image. So being good in one area of life doesn't qualify you to be good in another area, although it can be what I call a transferable virtue. So if you're confident in one area of life, it's possible for you to ride on that confidence, and that would allow you to now develop the confidence in another area. But it's not in it by itself a given that if you're confident in one area, that you're confident in all areas of life. So understanding and developing the knowledge and the skills and studying more about who you are and your self-confidence is, I think personally, is the best way to develop self-confidence. Now, let's move a little bit further. Let's move into talking about perhaps I'll give you a strategy, and then we'll move into tactics of how to develop your self-confidence. Let me start by making reference to what I think are two ways in which you can develop your self-confidence. The first is through memory. The second is through imagination. Now, both your memory and your imagination are parts of what we call your higher faculties of the mind. Your mind has higher faculties. I'll give you some of them: imagination, memory, perception, intuition, will, reason. These are higher faculties of your mind. Now, you notice something. To develop your self-confidence, I'm making you aware of the fact that it has to begin in your mind. I'm going to move one step further. by bringing your attention to something that I think is profound. I usually like to use a board when I teach this so I can illustrate it in a pictorial form. Each and every one of us has three parts to our personalities. Most of us have been raised and trained and educated on the premise that you are this physical being. If I meet you, and I meet anyone, most of the time when I've met people, most people introduce themselves along the lines of, I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm African, I'm European, I'm English, I'm Brit. People describe themselves based on what they do, based on their responsibilities, based on their ethnicity, based on their sex, male or female, based on their personal preferences, based on their passion. Most of the representations people have about themselves are external. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's external.